All right, welcome back, Powers on Sports Podcast. It is almost time for the National Football League to kick off. We were about 1 week away from the Rams and the Buffalo Bills on Thursday night, and no better person to talk all things AFC and NFC West preview than Tyler Jones. Tyler's the host and NFL analyst for Chat Sports. He's also the host of the Jones Report podcast. He's based out of Dallas, Texas. He's got big roots with the Kansas City Chiefs. He covers the Seattle Seahawks on a daily basis. So welcome back to the podcast, Mr. Jones.
Jason, good to hear from you, man. Right around the corner, preseason just wrapping up, and the start of the NFL season just around here. Love to get to watch some college football this weekend too, man.
Yep.
It's good to be on with you. Thanks for having me.
Speaking of college football, you're those Nebraska Cornhuskers, man. Those guys just cannot figure out a way to win, man. Win a game, unbelievable.
It's the gift that keeps on giving. As somebody that grew up an Oklahoma fan and went to the University of Kansas, I love nothing more than when Nebraska football loses. And even living up there, I'm like, oh man, this is going to be so entertaining. And because I lived up in Omaha for a year, and I got to tell you, it is just entertaining anytime Nebraska loses and finding new ways to lose each time. I mean, it's great. So I don't know how much longer Scott Frost has got, but as far as I'm concerned, you just why don't they just go ahead and keep him? I'm enjoying it. So.
Tyler's a huge Rock Chalk Jayhawk fan. Kansas. Real quick before we get to the NFL. What do you sense is going to happen with Kansas as far as alignment? You think they're going to stay in the Big 12, or you think they potentially go to the Big 10? What do you think happens there with Kansas?
I think if the Big 10 is going to 20 teams, then I would say that their chances of staying in the Big 12 are pretty high. If it goes beyond 20, 24, or who knows where, then, yeah, we could talk about Big 10 discussions for KU at that point down the line. But I think their future is in the Big 12, and the Big 12, I think, is in good shape right now. I feel optimistic about the league going forward, and I'd much rather be the Big 12 than the Pac-12 right now. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, Tyler's also going to be part of those of you that know, I'm part of the College Gridiron Coast to Coast podcast network with TJ Reeves. I'm hosting the Florida Football Insiders. Tyler's also a part of that network as well. Publicize what the podcast you're hosting, the new one you're starting.
Yeah, so the Big 12 breakdown, basically what we're doing is each week on the Jones Report, we have our Big 12 breakdown segments, and we're expanding that segment into basically its own show each week. And so myself, Thomas Bridges, my co-host, will just be breaking down all the happenings that's going on in the Big 12 each week, and everything from on the field to off the field with realignment and everything in between, with some great guests. Check it out there on the network. We already have one show up with a former Oklahoma State quarterback, Clint Shelf, who's with the Oklahoma State Radio Network. So a great chat with Clint Shelf available now.
Very good, very good, very cool. Like I said, this College Gridiron Coast to Coast Network is going to be a great thing. We're going to have podcasts from all over the country, every league covered, every big football area is going to be covered. Big 12, Pac-10, Big 10, SEC, ACC, Florida, everything in between. So check it out. College Gridiron Coast to Coast Podcast Network. All right, let's get to the National Football League. Let's start with your beloved Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC West. Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, 12-5 last year. They lose in the playoffs again, late in the playoffs. Big acquisition. They obviously signed Juju Smith-Schuster, MVS. The big loss obviously was Tyreek Hill. They lose Tyrann Mathieu, Charvarius Ward. First in the draft, they get Karlaftis out of Purdue, the defensive end. They bring in a guy they like, Sky Moore, at wide receiver. Just give me an overall sense of their offseason to date.
Well, I think for the Chiefs, what you have to look at, the big question is, did they get any better? And I don't think that they got any better from what they were last year with the moves that they made. Obviously, the receiving core takes a step back. The defense did get much better. But the thing is, the Chiefs are going to be a Super Bowl contender, as we've come to expect them to be year in and year out. But everyone else around them in that division got so much better. Raiders, Chargers, Broncos. The idea of anyone in that division being the number one seed at this point is just impossible. It's not happening. And so, with that said, I mean, the Chiefs, you're going through a gauntlet of the schedule.
Yes.
And, it's going to be a challenge for this team. I mean, they are going to be tested all throughout the year. And, it's going to be physically demanding, too. I think that maybe more injuries come of it with playing a tougher schedule compared to, about everyone else in the league on that front. I'm excited to see what Patrick Mahomes can do trying to adjust things. And I'll say this much. Where Patrick Mahomes can benefit with these changes, not having Tyreek Hill anymore, is that I go back to the first preseason game when they were playing against the Chicago Bears. Mahomes played one series, and he went 6 for 6 on a touchdown drive and found 6 different receivers,
Right.
and it was all in the short passing game. And so for Patrick Mahomes, I think going forward, not having Tyreek Hill there is going to force him to become more of a short passing game thrower, to be more efficient that way.
Right.
And I look at that could ultimately be a positive. That could be a maturing process for Patrick Mahomes of not trying to force things that aren't there, not trying to look for Tyreek Hill to bail you out. You still have Travis Kelce, too, the best tight end in football. So that certainly helps. So the offense will look different, but I still think that they're going to be a really good football team and still be contending. I don't have them winning the division, though. I have the Chargers winning the division, but I do think that the Chiefs are still going to be very good.
We are going to get to the Chargers in just a minute. Two questions on the Chiefs, and we'll move on. One, running game wise, are they focused? Are they going to try to be a little more balanced with Edwards-Helaire? Maybe. I know Ronald Jones, not sure what his status is going to be. I know there's speculation he might get traded here before the regular season starts. They signed a kid Pacheco, or drafted a kid Pacheco out of Rutgers. Running game wise, and then defense. Can the defense just get better, man? I know they're okay. They've been okay. Are they ever going to be a top 12, 13 defense in the league?
So running game wise, Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been disappointing. I mean, no ifs or ands or buts around it, right? I mean, former first round pick and everything, the guy that Patrick Mahomes wanted, and just hasn't been healthy. And when he has been on the field, he just hasn't been reliable. The thing I'm watching for is I really liked what I saw from Jerick McKinnon at the end of last year.
Okay.
He was their best running back last year, and he finished off the year really strong and was a good receiver out of the backfield. For me, I'm looking for, whether it's the issues with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Obviously, you would want Clyde to be your number one running back, for him to stay healthy and be good enough out there to play to his full potential. That would be what you want to see. But I think the most realistic option is that Jerick McKinnon is your guy leading the way, that he is that number one back, and then you hope that Jones or Edwards-Helaire, one of the two, could be available as your number two back. I think that's what's realistic for the Chiefs on that end. And, they're going to be a pass-first football team always. I don't see that changing. Andy Reid has never liked to run the football. And so I think you're looking at maybe a 60-40, 65-35 balance of pass versus run. And they'll use, I think, when we talked about the short passing game with Mahomes, that can be a substitute for the run game if they use that appropriately. So something to think about there. In regards to the defense, Trent McDuffie, George Karlaftis, those picks that they've made going defense heavy there, I think are going to see tremendous improvements. I think Frank Clark is also going to be a lot better than what he was last year, as well as Chris Jones. I think those guys will step up, and we'll see the Chiefs be at least top 15 defense, if not higher. I like what they bring to the table. And losing Tyrann Mathieu, I don't think it's that big of a deal, as some people may think, because they seem to be pretty high on Justin Reid, what Justin Reid brings to the table from Houston. And although the last couple of years weren't necessarily that great for Justin Reid, if you go back to what he did early on in Houston, when Houston was actually a contender and had talent around him, his numbers are really good. If they get that Justin Reed from a couple of years ago, then that defense, I think, is going to be in really good shape. And Juan Thornhill also needs to step up too. I know he hasn't been healthy, but you don't have Dan Sorensen anymore either. Lots going to be asked of Juan Thornhill, and I hope that he steps up and elevates this defense.
All right, let's move to Las Vegas. The Raiders, 10-7 last year. They make the wild card, lose to Cincinnati late in Cincinnati in that wild card game. They obviously the whole John Gruden stuff last year. They don't retain Bisaccia. They bring in the New England train of McDaniels and Ziegler from New England to lead the way. McDaniels obviously getting his next opportunity. The huge acquisitions in the offseason. Devontae Adams they trade for. They signed Chandler Jones. Those are the monster offensive and defensive additions. Remember they also lost Henry Ruggs last year with the whole drunk driving situation. My question is, can Adams in the offense, can they elevate? Can Derek Carr, is he the answer at quarterback to be the maestro of that offense with those weapons and with Josh McDaniels?
I think Derek Carr is going to have the best year of his career this year. Derek Carr gets disrespected a lot around the league. And I'm not the biggest Derek Carr fan either. I think he just kind of is what he is, top 15 quarterback, not anything worse, not anything better than that. But you add Devontae Adams to the fold. You have Darren Waller there as well. Yep. People forget. People aren't talking about Josh Jacobs enough either. Josh Jacobs playing in a contract year, I think, is a really good running back too. This offense is going to be very explosive there in Vegas. I will say this. I'm not high on Josh McDaniels. What he did in Denver, that was bad. That did not go well. Sure, he was younger, maybe had been a bit immature and wasn't ready for that job here, but I think the jury's still out on Josh McDaniels. Everything points to this team making big improvements, bringing in Devontae Adams and seeing what that run game is going to do with Josh Jacobs and Derek Carr and all that, the improvements they made. But for me, I wonder if Josh McDaniels is going to hold them back at all, or if he's going to take that next step that he needs to be a really good head coach in this league. That's my one concern. I would have brought back Rich Bisaccia. I thought he did everything that was asked of him last year. Of all the turmoil that team went through with John Gruden to get to the playoffs like they did, I thought he deserved that job. But I guess Mark Davis thought otherwise.
Defensively, this is where they've really struggled the last couple of years. They've drafted a lot of guys, and with Mayock, and they brought in some guys that just maybe haven't developed quite where they thought they would go. Where do you think, to me, defensively, it's the secondary. The secondary's not been very good the last couple of years. And in that division with those quarterbacks, you got to be able to cover guys. Do you see any improvement on the defense, especially in the secondary?
We'll see. But, that defense has been so pitiful, the last couple of years. And if they make any improvements, that remains to be seen at this point. But it seemed like they were so offensive focused this offseason that some of those holes on that defense kind of got forgotten about of some sorts. I think that it almost reminds me, Jason, of kind of like a Big 12 team that's hoping just to outscore its opponents, and then the defense just get a couple turnovers or get a couple of stops at that point. That's not a path for success in the National Football League, historically speaking, but we'll see what the Raiders can do.
I think ideally they're going to hope that defensive line with Chandler Jones and Matt Crosby makes the job of the back four much easier, where you don't have to cover but maybe a couple seconds because of that pressure, because they've got tremendous defensive ends.
Yeah, I liked bringing in Chandler Jones from Arizona, but he is on the back end of his career too. So you have to wonder, what Chandler Jones are you getting at this point in his career in 2022? That I don't know. If they get the Chandler Jones that we saw a couple years ago,
sure,
watch out. But to me, that's going to be a big path of their success. Is going to be what they get out of Chandler Jones.
All right, let's head to Denver, Mile High City. Russell Wilson comes to town. New head coach Nathaniel Hackett, the former Green Bay OC. Denver was 7-10 last year. Fangio released of his duties. They bring in Nathaniel Hackett. They bring in Russ, obviously, with the big trade. Randy Gregory comes over from Dallas. They lose Noah Fant in the trade to Seattle. They lose Shelby Harris in the trade. Two kind of unsung, really good, pretty good players. Obviously, this is all centered around Russ. You have the defense, it seems like, in place. Can Russ elevate this offense? They haven't had a quarterback in a while. Can Russ be the difference maker in Denver?
I think that they will see a step up for sure. But I want to remind folks, too, Russell Wilson, I've thought, has been one of the most overrated quarterbacks in this league.
Wow.
Quite frankly. I mean, Russell Wilson, I mean, he's a very good player, but I think that if you take that Super Bowl ring away from him, we have a much different perspective about Russell Wilson than what he actually is, quite frankly.
You don't believe in him cooking? You don't believe in him cooking?
You're right. With that said, I look at this team and, the receiving talents there. I mean, Cortland Sutton
yes,
is really good. Their run game, they got some good weapons there. With that said, this Denver Bronco team, I think, is right on the edge of a borderline playoff team. I think they're right there with the Las Vegas Raiders. It's pretty close between those two as far as that gap goes. The offense is going to be there. I like what, some of those pieces we mentioned, like Cortland Sutton and others, and
Jerry Jeudy,
and Jerry Jeudy, I think, could have a big breakout year in 2022. He could really step up and be a Pro Bowl caliber player, but we'll see. There's still some other missing pieces there. They're not complete. I still think they're another year away from potentially contending for a Super Bowl. This will be a breakthrough year. They'll see a step up, but there's still a ways to go, I think.
Remember, folks, there's 7 teams now going to the playoffs in each conference. You have an extra wild card, so there's an extra opportunity to get into the playoffs there. So, lots of people think this division could have 3 teams in the playoffs very easily, if not potentially 4, if everything worked out correctly, schedule.
Well, and so far what we've seen, Jason, is in the last couple of years, that 7th seed has been so irrelevant that it hasn't looked like a playoff team. That, whether it was Pittsburgh or Philly last year or prior to that, I mean, those teams have looked so bad. So you may say, okay, yeah, you could send 3 or 4 teams. Well, history tells us that 17 isn't going to stand a chance in the playoffs. So we'll see if something changes, but it does feel like a significant gap.
No doubt. The one question I have with Fangio gone, is the defense still going to be elite? I know you got good players over there, but you got a new DC, probably a new scheme to some degree. Can that defense still be elite while the offense catches up?
I think so. Fangio was a really good defensive coach, but obviously wasn't made out to be a head coach. But you still have a lot of the same key pieces there on that defense for Denver.
Yeah.
I think that defense is going to be fine. Personally, I like what that group does, and for years, what have we said about the Denver Broncos? That hey, they have the defense, they have those pieces, they have some offensive weapons. They just need a quarterback. They're a quarterback away. Well, now we're about to finally find out if they truly were just a quarterback away.
You're right. No, you're totally right on that. So. All right, we'll wrap up the AFC West. Going back to LA, the Chargers 9-8. Brandon Staley's second year in charge. The meltdown he had with the game management situation in Week 17 against the Raiders last year really cost them a playoff berth. That's, to me, that's what we're going to talk about that in a second here. But they add Khalil Mack, they add J.C. Jackson in free agency, trade for Khalil Mack. They re-sign Mike Williams. They draft another offensive lineman, Zion Williams, in the first round. They get a sneaky good pick in Isaiah Spiller at running back, a guy you probably are familiar with from, I believe, Texas A&M, to complement Eckler. Is it time for Herbert's done great stat-wise, but is it time does he have to do more of the leadership type stuff, elevating his team?
I don't think he has to do more. I think he has to continue what he's been doing.
Okay.
I think that we're going to see Justin Herbert lead the Chargers to a division title. I think that Herbert's going to win the MVP this year.
There you go. I like that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a big year for Justin Herbert. I like everything about this Chargers team, what they bring to the table. Mike Williams, terrific. Austin Eckler back there as well. This is going to be a fun team to watch. And
Yes.
you mentioned Brandon Staley, and what I find fascinating, everybody has been so hard on Brandon Staley for what went down of calling the timeouts in the Week 18 game, and going forward on fourth down against the Chiefs and potentially costing him 2 games right there, the difference of the playoffs. Here's the other thing though. If they convert those things, if those things go his direction, aren't we spending all offseason talking about how much of a genius Brandon Staley is? And wow, the way that he, in his first year, how aggressive he was. Personally, I like a coach that's aggressive. Sure, it didn't work out, but he showed confidence in his team. He instilled that belief. And I think that part of that can pay off in the long run when your coach has that confidence in you like that. I mean, we saw a few years ago when Frank Wright against the Texans decided to go for it on fourth down on his own end instead of going for the tie and punting it, and they lost the game. But his team was motivated and found a lot of confidence the rest of the way that year for that Indianapolis Colts team. And so I think Brandon Staley here, with what he did last year, I would think that he's won over that locker room. I think Brandon Staley is a very good coach, a very good defensive coach, did a good job with the LA Rams before that. And, the Khalil Mack signing for me, we're in a day and age. You have all some really good defensive talent, Aaron Donald, TJ Watt, all these guys. But I got to tell you, from what I've seen out of Khalil Mack, I mean, he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Right.
And I remember him coming out of Buffalo too. Like, wow, the tape on this guy is just incredible. And, I still think about that game, Jason, when he almost single-handedly beat the Packers with his first game in Chicago and just gave Aaron Rodgers havoc all night long. I still think he can be that same player, that he's still capable of that. I don't think he's lost a step here. And I think
you pair him with Bosa. And you pair him with Bosa on the other side.
Right? Now he has talent around him compared to the bad situation he was in with Chicago. You pair him with Bosa and those players there, watch out. I mean, this Chargers defense is going to be lethal. And, we mentioned going up against the quarterbacks in this league, Derek Carr, Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes. I mean, you're in for an awakening when you go up against this Charger defense.
Right.
You're trying to figure out, okay, what do we got to do pass protection wise, knowing that we got to go up against these great pass rushers like this. It's going to be a problem.
No doubt. No, that many people think the Chargers are the most talented team in the league on both sides of the ball, from 1 to 53, that they've got the most talent. They re-signed Derwin James in the offseason to a big extension as well. So lots of excitement and optimism.
And they were criticized for the Derwin James extension because of his lack of health.
Right.
But if you're the Chargers, I think the talent's there. Injuries sometimes don't go your way. If you're the Chargers, I think you had to make that move.
I agree. He's a freak athlete at safety.
You had to make that move. I mean, if you are serious about being a contender and building this thing for the long term, that's just a risk you have to accept with that type of talent.
I agree wholeheartedly. All right, you're listening to the Powers on Sports podcast. Tyler Jones, NFL host, analyst for Chat Sports, and the host of the Jones Report podcast, as well as the Big 12 podcast as part of the College Gridiron Coast to Coast podcast network. We're doing AFC and NFC West previews. We've wrapped up the AFC West. Sounds like you like the Chargers. I'm going to stick with your beloved Chiefs until I see differently. They win the division every year somehow, some way. But I do think it'll come down to the head-to-head matchups between the Chiefs and the Chargers to see who wins that division. It wouldn't shock me if they tied in the standings and one of them wins a tiebreaker type situation in the playoffs. So
they've tied before.
Yes. All right, let's go to the NFC West. San Francisco 49ers made a big run to the NFC title game last year. They lose to the Rams 10-7. There's a lot of playoff intermingling in this division from last year. 10-7, Shanahan and Lynch. They add Travarius Ward. They re-signed Debo to a big extension. The only thing to talk about here with the 49ers is two words: Trey Lance. Do you believe in him? Do you think he's the guy? They're putting all their eggs in his basket. Go.
So here's the thing I look at with Trey Lance. I think that obviously the jury's still out on Trey Lance. We haven't seen much on him, and still very raw. But at the same time, too, how bad was Jimmy Garoppolo the last couple of years? I mean, it was not great what we saw out of Jimmy G.
No.
He did enough. He managed the game, to get them to the NFC Championship game. But, I mean, that's one thing I'm looking at is, okay, Lance still has a ways to go. But realistically, if he just plays like Jimmy G did,
Right.
they're going to be fine.
Right.
I mean, I don't think that's asking too much of a guy in his second year in the league that's been in the system and all this. Can he at least do what Jimmy G did? I mean, to me, that shouldn't be a tall task to ask of Trey Lance. But remember, too, that's not why they brought him in. They didn't bring him in just to be another Jimmy G. No, right. They brought him in because they wanted him to be, a superstar quarterback.
The flexibility in the offense, the movement, the bootlegs, all that kind of stuff.
Right. And so with that, I think with Trey Lance, what they need to see is some big playability. With Jimmy Garoppolo, you were never going to, run, a vertical passing game and move the football downfield that way. They were always going to be run heavy and try to open up the play action that way. With Trey Lance, what you want to see is him be able to move the football through the air and get a vertical passing game and not rely on your running game so much.
Yep.
If Trey Lance can do those things, you're not asking him to be MVP this year. You're asking him just to be able to move the football and go about things that way. Then the 49ers are going to be just fine. I mean, this team is loaded. I'm glad that things worked out with Deebo Samuel after the initial trade request to get him the contract extension, and then also to work out, the idea of him still being a running back at times too.
Yep.
The versatility. I know that the wear and tear on the running back position is brutal, but I mean, you got to use players to the best of their abilities.
Yeah.
And Deebo Samuel, if he can be, a running back,
5 carries a game, you give him 5 carries a game,
whatever it may be.
Yep.
Whatever it may be, use him to the best, get the most you can out of Deebo Samuel. I don't think that's asking too much.
No, you got Kittle and you got Ayuk. They got weapons. They got a good running back core with Mitchell and Trey Sermon. I mean, they got players.
Trey Sermon was really good at Oklahoma and then Ohio State too. Yep. He's a guy I would use more of, and maybe that's how you relieve some of those carries from Deebo Samuel is using Trey Sermon more in that run game. I mean, George Kittle is right up there with one of the best in the league. For me, though, I got to see George Kittle be more healthy, though. He's got to be out there on the field more. I mean, you think about last year, they were 10-7 and got to the NFC Championship game. But if they would have had some of those guys, like Kittle and others, for most of the season, I mean, who knows? They could have won 12, 13 games last year.
Right.
I felt like we didn't see this team to its full potential, even with them getting the NFC title game. If we see Lance, break out the vertical passing game and play better than Jimmy G, watch out. I mean, there's a chance the Niners could go to the Super Bowl this year.
I'm with you. No, you're right. They're a very dangerous team. Very, very dangerous team. So, all right, let's head to Los Angeles, the Super Bowl champion Rams. They 12-5. Again, they beat the 49ers in the title game. They beat the Cardinals in the wild card game. They add Allen Robinson. They add Bobby Wagner, which is a sneaky, very good signing. They lose Whitworth to retirement. Von Miller goes to Buffalo. Darius Williams, their corner, leaves as well. They also lose their OC. Kevin O'Connell goes to Minnesota to be the head coach. The old McVay tree strikes again to anybody around the league that thinks I got to get somebody from the McVay tree. Are you worried at all about Stafford's elbow? A lot of issues in training camp, rumors about his elbow. To me, that's worrisome when you have a quarterback that has an elbow injury. What are your thoughts on his elbow?
I'm not too concerned. I think that's something that can be worked through, especially this early on. I don't think it's the end of the world that he's dealing with that elbow issue. And of the changes you made, as the Rams, The Bobby Wagner one is really interesting to me because here's a guy that, they did the NFL 100 ratings, just a week or two ago, was still in like the top 40, even this late in his career. And as good as he's still playing at an elite level. And, everyone was shocked when the Seahawks cut him. All the money that they're still having to pay, when it comes to dead cap money to Bobby Wagner. But this is a guy that, he felt kind of disrespected when the Seahawks let him go like that. And now, he's got a chip on his shoulder or something to prove. I thought that was a very good signing to bring Bobby Wagner in. And this offense last year was so dynamic with what they were able to do in the passing game. And even when they lost Robert Woods, they still found ways to move the football. There's still a possibility they bring in Odell Beckham. There's been talk that they want Odell back, but we saw what they did adding him mid-season, and was the perfect solution for when they didn't have Robert Woods out there. Maybe you bring Odell back, once he gets healthy, and then there's another weapon still to your arsenal. I think that's possible. You get Odell back. Another player I like that I think doesn't get enough respect from this Rams team is Tyler Higbee at tight end. I don't know how he gets forgotten about. I think Higbee is very good. He's good about getting open. Maybe he doesn't get downfield a whole lot. Kind of reminds me of like Heath Miller or something when he was in Pittsburgh. To me, I think you can't forget about Higbee. On top of everything with this Rams team, they have certain guys that just almost go unnoticed for the work they do. Jalen Ramsey is still the best cornerback in this league. There's a lot going on for this Rams team. Their window, it's not going to last long. They only have a couple of years of this thing. Eventually, all those draft picks they don't have are going to catch up with them at some point. But for now, it looks like this team's still in good shape. And I don't have them coming out of the NFC again. I don't think they'll win the conference, but I think they're going to be very good.
No doubt. And you mentioned, Bobby Wagner. I think that's a great, sneaky, great hire, a great signing. He'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer as well. You mentioned Khalil Mack. Bobby Wagner's going to the Hall of Fame. As good as he's been in this league, as long as he's been a Pro Bowl middle linebacker. My sneaky player here is year 2 after the Achilles, Cam Akers at running back. If he can be back to what he was at the end of his rookie year, I know he tried to come back at the end of last year, wasn't quite there yet. Maybe that another offseason of coming back from that Achilles, you fortify that running game. That's what, to me, if they can run the ball, that's what, again, that opens up the play action, and that opens up guys like Higbee, because Higbee's always going to get man coverage. Because when you have Kupp and you have Allen Robinson and all the weapons they have, Higbee's going to be the guy that's not going to get all the attention, and thus your point well taken. He can be a guy that's very lethal in spots where he's always going to they're going to draw up some plays for him because he's always going to be getting man coverage from either a safety or a linebacker. So, all right. So let's do this. We're going to take a quick timeout. We're going to have a commercial break. We're going to be right back, and we will finish up with the Seahawks and the Arizona Cardinals. We'll be right back.